Sharethrough is a scaled omni-channel exchange, and we've been working really over the past 10 plus years to understand actual human behavior, trying to understand the people that see our millions of ads every day, how they're consuming them, how they're consuming the organic content, and how can we design ads to actually work within that framework and improve the way ads work with that understanding. So what I want to do today is share with you some of those learnings and how you might apply those to campaigns that you're working on. I want to start out actually by asking you a question and just yell out your answer. What are some of the goals of campaigns that you've worked on recently? What's a campaign goal? Awareness. Revenue. Video completion rate. Okay. Nobody said clicks. That's good, I think. You know, all of those things are relevant answers and typical answers. I would argue that they're missing the ultimate underlying truth of every ad campaign, which is to change people's minds. You're trying to get someone to make a different decision than they would have made had they not seen your ad, right? Which requires changing their mind. You're trying to get them to buy your product instead of a competitor's, or realize there's a product they need they weren't aware of. Maybe vote for your candidate, donate to your cause. All of those things require them to change their mind. And of course, we can't measure mind change on an impression-to-impression basis. So these other metrics are helpful. But if we keep in mind what the ultimate underlying goal is, we can really use that frame of reference, especially in the early parts of campaign design, like creative execution, for example, to improve the results of our campaigns. Of course, it's a little daunting to think about changing someone's mind. We tend to think about it as a journey you're taking someone on, where step one is exposure, right? You're putting an ad on a web page, you're putting a billboard up in the park. And ultimately, you're trying to get them to behavior change, which again requires a mind change. But what are some of the steps along the way? One of the steps that we actually are pretty good at action on, no one mentioned viewability, but a lot of people do look at viewability and attention, right? If no one's paying attention to your ad, it clearly can't change their mind. Once they're paying attention to your ad, did they comprehend it? Did they actually take in the information and process it in some way? And you know, this isn't a perfect picture, but it helps you start to think about, okay, if I want to get towards changing someone's mind, how do I make sure they're paying attention to my ad? And then how do I make sure they're comprehending it? And those are really the two topics we'll focus on today. Obviously, on this journey, there are some pitfalls. You know, you could have an exposure to an ad that's never seen, right? In this example, the ad's completely below the fold. Clearly, the user will never consume it. No chance of this ad changing the user's mind. Even once an ad is technically viewable, it doesn't mean it got attention. For one thing, it might have barely met the viewability thresholds, or the user just wasn't actually looking at that part of the screen. And let's say we do get attention. Did the user actually comprehend the ad? Watch this video. This is a very typical Outstream video. Outstream is the lion's share of video on the internet, and it's always played in a sound-off environment, unless the rare case of a user turning it on. Can you tell me what this video is about? You see the Amex logo at the end, so you know it's an ad for Amex, but you can't, all of you paying attention, I'm forcing you to pay attention to it, you still can't tell me what it's about. And this is actually a really common problem with Outstream videos. Whoever designed this video obviously had no idea that it was going to be played with the sound off, because it doesn't make any sense without sound. So how do we improve attention and comprehension? To help understand kind of where we are right now, we recently released a study with ExchangeWire on attention, focused here in the UK. And we learned people are paying attention to this. People are aware of it. Over 2/3 of buyers in the UK are factoring attention KPIs into their campaigns. And they're using primarily viewability, but also encouragingly other signals like time in view and eye tracking that are even more accurate than viewability for measuring attention. But there's agreement that we need better standards. And if you think about those different metrics on the last slide, we have a standard for viewability, but we really don't have standards for things like time in view or eye tracking. We're really relying on bespoke vendors to sort of construct those metrics for us. But they're still valuable. So in that context, how can we improve attention and comprehension? comprehension. One is we can move beyond viewability and target high attention placements. And a set of vendors have cropped up around this fairly recently. For example, Adelaide is probably the most well-known company in this space, where they're taking in other signals beyond viewability. Viewability is one signal they're taking in, but they're also looking at time in view, eye tracking studies to help build a model of attention that moves a step beyond viewability. And these metrics show promising results. Adelaide shows great results in terms of purchase intent and ROI, and so you can use these types of vendors to move one step past viewability towards attention, and you could do this by partnering with those vendors, by activating them in your DSP, or for example, Sharethrough and other exchanges, I'm sure, offer these in our audience curation package. You can buy through Sharethrough a high attention deal, for example, where we're using the Adelaide data to help you drive. Again, it's just sort of one step beyond viewability, right? But I think it's a valuable step to take. Once you've actually started to target high attention, you can measure the effectiveness. For example, with eye tracking, there are now vendors around that can do eye tracking studies on CTV, like TVision, to understand whether people are actually looking at your CTV ads. And of course, for some time, there have been eye tracking vendors on the web. And while you can't use these for day-to-day campaign optimization, you can use them for longer-term campaign optimization or understanding the effectiveness of your tactics. But I really want to spend most of my time talking about how you actually address the creative itself. How do you use the actual creative to create attention and comprehension? We did a study last year on consumer behavior in video and how has consumer behavior changed over time in consuming online video. We're mostly going to talk about video today. And the biggest learning from that was that videos are usually played with the sound off. 3/4 of video on phone, nearly 2/3 on computers. It's also a high percentage on CTV. And so keep in mind, what we're talking about here is the user turning the sound off, which means that even if you're running an ad in a, quote, sound on environment, like an interstitial pre-roll ad, the user's still not going to hear it because their computer's speaker is off. So you need to be aware of that when you're targeting your ad campaigns. Assume the sound is off. And as a result, people expect there to be captions on videos. Across all device formats, consumers expect to see captions. And they've been trained to see captions largely from social platforms. This has changed our expectations so much that people even watch TV with the sound off and with captions on. This was honestly quite surprising to me. I don't personally do this, but after we did this study last year, I started asking friends and colleagues about this, and it supported the data. I realized there were lots of scenarios like multi-adult households that are watching multiple pieces of content, households with children where they don't want to have the sound on, or a lot of people that are sort of passively consuming TV in the background. All of these scenarios were causing users to turn the sound off, even on TV, and then turn the captions on. And of course, we all got used to this as advertisers and as users of the social platforms. We expect to see captions on Instagram and on TikTok. Why not on the open web? Why not in something like that example I showed earlier of that Amex ad? And so that was one of the first things we built in response to this. We said, why don't we launch captions? Well, where should we launch captions? We had a bunch of earlier data from eye tracking studies we'd done that said, well, where do users look at when they're looking at ads? Turns out they actually spend most of their time looking at the headline, not at the image. There's actually a bunch of cool science around this at nativeadscience.com that we published, but we learned that the headline is really important. And so we launched a product to put captions in the headline space. And so we tested this. We tested both with and without captions on real humans to understand what effect would captions have on ad outcomes and on people's comprehension. And we asked them afterwards, not only can you remember what the ad was about, but can you remember what the underlying organic content was about? And the results were very compelling. 56% increase in comprehension for the ads with captions. And I think most surprisingly, that actually brought the comprehension of the ad up to parity with the underlying organic content. So this means, to be clear, when we ask the user after they've seen the ad, can you remember what the ad was about and can you remember what the page was about? They successfully remembered it equally, which feels to me like kind of a gold star as an advertiser, right? If you can get someone to understand the content at the same rate that they're understanding the actual page they came to see, I don't know how much of a better result you can get as an advertiser. So that was really exciting to us. We've made captions the default in our exchange. When you target video ads at our exchange, we automatically transcribe them and caption them. And so because we've now been doing that for a couple of years, we've been able to see quite a few different brand studies that we've run on those campaigns over time. And we see consistent results. We see consistently amazing results on comprehension and awareness with captions versus without, right? So key message here, add captions to your videos, right? And you can do it automatically with Sharethrough, or you can do it other ways with other platforms. Make sure your ads have captions because the sound is off. So we focused the last sort of 18 to 24 months more on CTV, obviously a growing ad format. Everybody loves to talk about CTV. And we wanted to understand more about how users are interacting with CTV. I alluded to it a bit earlier in terms of the captions. Of course, it's harder than ever to force your audience to pay attention to TV ads. 75% saying they're not paying attention to TV ads. Well, what are they doing instead? They're looking at their phone, right? 80% of people are looking at their phone during commercial breaks. I know I do this. I'm a big Broadway fan, so we were watching the Tonys on Sunday with some friends. It's like the Olivier Awards here in London. And we didn't have TV, so we were going to stream it from a phone and cast it to the TV. But we all looked at each other. No one wanted to be the one to use their phone to stream it and have their phone, taken away for 3 hours for this awards show, right? So we're all looking around. Luckily, somebody had an iPad, back in the other room. So we were all able to keep our phones with us and still watch the show. And I'm sure, almost everyone in the room behaves that way. Of course, that challenge does create an opportunity. The fact that you have this device in your hand that's interactive, unlike a TV, which is not very interactive, does create an opportunity because now you have this device you can actually interact with the brand from. And we saw that QR codes are a great way to create that interaction. Not only do QR codes create an opportunity for people to, of course, scan and actually interact with the brand, but they actually attract attention in and of themselves. 12% higher attention just for having the QR code there, whether people scan them or not. So QR codes were sort of the first product we launched in this vein. We then said, well, what else can we do to bring attention back to the TV? And we think the core answer there is bringing content into the ad experience that the user might find valuable, right? If the user has a reason to pay attention to the TV, then they'll pay attention to the TV. So for example, one of the products we've launched is a sports ticker. So if you're watching a sports game and an ad comes on, you'll see the scores of the other teams in the league on the bottom of the screen as the ad is playing, right? It's bringing you content that you presumably have interest in because you were watching a sports game, and it's keeping your attention on the TV, and so while you're looking at the sports scores, you're also going to be consuming the ad that's playing right next to it. And 91% of sports fans were more likely to pay attention to TV ads if they had a sports ticker. One of the more broad solutions, we do something similar with weather. The nice thing about weather is almost everyone has some level of interest in the weather. And so if an ad comes on, again, we'll show the weather in your local area as the ad is playing. The idea is giving you something you might find interesting, keep your attention on the screen. And over half of consumers were more likely to pay attention to ads surrounded with this type of content. We've also experimented some with content that's more related to the actual ad. For example, this countdown timer that's counting down towards an event. We noticed actually one of the biggest advertisers in our platform is streaming platforms themselves that are usually advertising the launch of a new episode or a new season or a new show. And so we use the countdown timer for that. It's also been popular with the election and other sorts of events. And it does generate more retention of knowledge of when the promotion or the event is going to start when we survey consumers after the fact. So these are the types of products that we've launched for CTV. We plan to continue iterating in this area and doing other interesting things. We've been looking at things like news feed, and we were going to do a Twitter thing, but I don't know, Twitter's sort of imploding now, so I think we'll pause on that one. But just wanted to kind of wrap up with some key takeaways in terms of what I would suggest. I think I've mentioned it before, but I know I've mentioned it before, but if you remember one thing from this presentation, remember the sound is off. Even if you're buying a sound on CTV ad or a sound on interstitial ad, the user has turned the device's sound off. So it doesn't matter what your reporting says that the sound is on. The device's sound is off, or the user set their headphones down on the table and doesn't have them on. So you need to assume that people are not looking at your ad. Number one answer to that is add captions. Another possible answer, of course, is when you're creating the video in the first place, design it so that it can be consumed without the sound, right? Craft your creative strategy so that it doesn't need sound or captions. Number one thing you can do. Also, use new types of vendors and metrics, right? We talked about high attention placements, eye tracking, time in view. You can use these things to help optimize towards attention and comprehension. And you can measure them after the fact. Again, some of the vendors we talked about with eye tracking and other types of comprehension. So again, I just come back to my initial point, which is if you don't get yourself too distracted with things like clicks and video completion rates and reach, and remember, you're actually trying to change somebody's mind. Think about the creative you're showing them, the context the user is watching it in. Are they going to hear and see your ad? You can really help optimize and get actual results for your campaign. So thank you for your time today.